Hear the whispers from within, balance to restore, ailings to relieve. Feel the nature keeping us, nature healing us. Flowers, leaves, and roots within. Hear the mind calming you, soothing you. Love and kindness inside out. Let the herbs from middle world heal. Welcome wellness, welcome wellness. It's revealed herbs, middle world herbs.
And welcome to Middle World Herbs Natural Wellbeing Series, where we talk about restoring and maintaining your health in safe and natural ways while incorporating both the physical and the emotional side of healing. We go live twice a week on Tuesdays and on Fridays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And each week we talk about different aspects of health. Today's topic, we are focusing on diabetes. And did you know earlier this week on March 22nd, we had Diabetes Alert Day. And it truly is an alert since cases of type 2 diabetes have doubled in America in the past 20 years. Today, Dr. Jacquie will be answering the most common questions about diabetes life, and we have been discussing 100% natural ways of living a diabetes-free lifestyle. So stay tuned for all that. My name is Deanne, and I will be your host today, and I'm here with our special guest, Dr. Jacquie Leone, a naturopathic medical doctor, board-certified holistic nutritionist, and psychology enthusiast. So Dr. Jacquie, welcome, and I know you always like to have a little different story each time when you introduce yourself, so I'm all ears to hear how you got to your path of where you are today, and if you can connect it to Diabetes Alert Day too. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I was actually thinking about this and kind of racking my brain and, what was my first experience with diabetes and wanting to help. And it's funny. I love this question every week. So I did martial arts as a young girl for a long time, and I was really engaged. And the two people who taught me actually were suffering and managing type 2 diabetes. And I didn't really know what that was. I was 9 when I started at the time, and just these people that I looked up to and who were mentors having to stop to have snacks or like inject themselves with something, or, I didn't know at the time it was insulin and it's for blood sugar and all these things. But, I knew that they were suffering from this weird word diabetes that I had never heard before. And it kind of planted a seed as I grew older, and I got that job at the natural health clinic when I was in college, seeing people walk in with prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and then seeing that they could be put into remission after a few months, seeing that diet and lifestyle and supplements could actually reverse something that up until that point I was convinced was permanent. They would die early, they would suffer, like all of these fear state things around diabetes. And so when I really saw in action what was happening, how we could put it in remission and or reverse prediabetes, and it was just mind-blowing to me, and I had to share it with the world. And these people who really sculpted who I was, right? They taught me discipline and consistency and believed in me when I didn't. And, I will always remember my first exposure to diabetes with them and having such a passion to want to try and remove that obstacle from people's lives, because I saw front row how challenging it can be, the neuropathy, the pains, the fatigue, the, heart disease issues, weight issues, all the things that go along with it became very personal to me because the people that I love, were being affected. So that is my little backstory on diabetes. It's super important, and a lot of people we care about have it. It's the number 7 leading cause of death in the United States, and I'm glad we're talking about it today.
Yeah, super important topic. So follow-up question, what belt did you get to, and are you still in martial arts?
I did Northern Shaolin Kung Fu for 4 years, and I got up to, in Northern Shaolin, it's red, brown, black. I got up to red. I was going to be tested for the brown black kind of transition right when my parents separated and we had to move across town. And so I would try to bike the best I could for a few months, but it was late at night. I was like 13, 14. It was a little scary. And it was just something that we didn't maintain after that. I think, life changes, transitions, finances, parents, you don't know when you're a kid, they don't disclose that stuff, but red belt. And I'm going to brag a little bit. I was actually pretty dang good. Yeah, I was actually in 1994, and I have the award. I went through my storage unit, like I was sharing with you, and just going through all my old things from office and home. I saw my little 1994 Triple Crown winner award for
Triple
forms,
Crown.
fighting,
You're
and
like,
weapon. Yeah.
you're Cobra Kai status. Do you watch that show? And I love that show. And
I was the 10-year-old Cobra Kai. Yep, that
you
was
are
me.
so
But
Cobra Kai.
I
Well,
10.
just so you know, it's not too late to have an adult hobby and start again. And maybe you'll be like
I
the
miss
adult
it.
women champion.
I really do miss it. I really do miss
You
it.
should
I
try
have a
it.
staff. I'll play around every once in a while. I see a long broomstick, and because that was my weapon of choice, was the staff. So everything
Okay.
turns into a staff, right? Everything. A big long
Nice.
stick, a broomstick,
Yeah.
any stick. Let's go. So it's still in there somewhere. And you're right.
That's
it's never too late.
awesome. Yes, totally get back into it. All right, I just want to clarify, James, our producer, I'm not seeing our live on Amazon. Is that running? Is it just my site that's not showing it to me? Let me know, because I don't see anyone's comments or anything. But okay,
I
so
also just got like
you're
3
looking
texts
into it?
saying, I just got 3
Okay.
texts from people and friends saying, "I don't see you live. Are you live?"
Oh, okay. Okay. Do you want us to keep going, or should we like pause for a second? Okay, cool. All right, well, I will introduce everyone to the 2 supplements we're going to be talking about today from Middle World Herbs. They both include a really important herb called berberine, which we're going to talk a lot about today.
Yep.
And we have the berberine HCl40, and then we also have the berberine with bitter melon and banaba leaf. So before we dive into this, oh, it looks like our Amazon is up now. Yay. So we are now live. I see it. Before we dive into it, and we just need to understand a little more about diabetes. So Dr. Jacquie, what is diabetes and how can someone be tested for it?
This is actually a really good question, because I think even people who have diabetes don't understand what's happening in their body. And they can sometimes have mental blocks when the doctor is like, let's lose weight, work on diet and lifestyle. I feel like sometimes people feel judged when they have a disease state, and it's almost like a finger pointing of the doctor. You need to fall in line or else. But when we don't know the why, we don't know why it's happening to us. We don't know how the mechanism is working. Sometimes we can feel disempowered. And so I'm really glad that you asked what it is and how do we get tested. So diabetes is essentially related to the pancreas and the blood sugar. So what happens when we eat? When we eat, sugar, glucose, starches go immediately into the bloodstream, right? The brain, the central nervous system, like the spinal cord and stuff, runs on glucose. That's its ideal form of nutrition. Not fat, not fructose, but glucose specifically. So our body wants that as readily available as possible, right? But how does, like, if I want to get this water into my body, the water's here and I'm here, I can't, there has to be an action that creates that, right? And so that's what insulin's job is. Blood sugar or something in the fluid that we want in the cell, insulin opens the door and allows it to happen, okay? So insulin is made in the pancreas, and that's why there's an issue or connection between the pancreas being a little sluggish or having issues and blood sugar, okay? Because the pancreas is part of the digestive process, and it releases lots of cool enzymes and hormones, insulin being one of them. So if I eat sugar and it's in my blood and I need it, but insulin didn't show up to do his job, insulin's not opening that door, insulin's not helping bridge the gap, my blood sugar stays really high, and then I start to go down, right? The cell starts to die or fatigue because it's not getting what it needs to function. So we get fatigue, brain fog, nerves don't work as well, our heart doesn't work as well, our kidneys don't work as well, all because these are tissues that need glucose to function. And so if the blood sugar is trapped in the blood and can't get into the tissue or the organ or the cell, we're going to crave sugar and eat a ton of sugar, spike the blood sugar, but it's not going anywhere, right? And our brain's like, we're starving. What's happening? So we eat more sugar. And before we know it, our blood sugar is 400 or 500, 600, and our body starts breaking down because we feel like we're starving, but our blood sugar is way too high. And in that case, that's when most people get diagnosed with diabetes. Now, there are levels to diabetes, right? So we've all heard or maybe heard type 1, type 2. What does that mean? Type 1 is called type 1 because it means your body just does not make insulin at all. Usually children, teens, and young adults are diagnosed with this because you can't live too long with no insulin, right? You're going to be diagnosed pretty quickly. And you're going to be insulin dependent for the rest of your life because genetically your pancreas just doesn't make insulin, right? So that's type 1, and that's usually known as childhood, juvenile, or teen-related diabetes. Now, we have diabetes type 2, which is developed over a long period of time. Most people aren't diagnosed till they're in their 40s for type 2 diabetes. And what happens with that is the pancreas is still letting out a little bit of insulin, right? The insulin, this guy is still here. But what happens is our body stops responding to that insulin. So it's like, well, what do? I don't understand this concept, right? And sorry for the clanking, but the point is like the insulin's there, but that process isn't being transmitted. The door isn't being opened to the cell. The sugar's not going from the blood into the body, into the cell, right? But insulin's there. It's just not working well, or our body's just rejecting or resistant to our own insulin. So maybe you've heard insulin resistance, right? Maybe your doctor has thrown out prediabetes, insulin resistance, metabolic disease. These are all words related to you're going to have type 2 diabetes if something doesn't change soon, right? So you have type 1 you're born with, type 2 you develop. Then you have gestational. Gestational is pretty incredible for whatever reason. It's only in pregnant women, gestation period, right? Pregnancy period. And it tends to develop during pregnancy. And then usually within a few weeks or months postpartum, it naturally corrects itself. Most women who develop gestational diabetes during pregnancy will not have it post-pregnancy, which is really interesting. So that has something to do with the pregnancy affecting how the body releases insulin, right? And how resistant or sensitive we are to our own insulin. So those are the three main types we think of: type 1, type 2, and gestational or pregnancy diabetes. Now there's a fourth one that people don't talk about because it's technically not like major diagnostic criteria, but it's speaking of the whispers that we've talked about, where the body always wants you to know what's going on. So the whisper or way our body says, hey, I need help, is we will develop what's called pre-diabetes. And pre-diabetes is when our blood sugar is a little wonky, a little normal, a little wonky, a little normal. And it's kind of teetering on the fence. Are we going to prevent diabetes, or are we going to turn on diabetes? Are we going to prevent diabetes, or are we going to make it happen? And that's pre-diabetes. And that's the perfect sweet spot or window for us to reverse that process, get the body resensitized to its own insulin, and get insulin to show up to work so it can do its job and get blood sugar into the cell, right? Now, the ways to test for this, there are a bunch of tests, but the two most common are fasting glucose. So those of you who get your annual labs from your primary care doctor or from your general medicine doctor, they usually do 3 to 4 baseline tests every year, right? They're going to check white and red blood cells, anemia, infection, cancers. They're going to check your liver and kidneys, your metabolic kind of filter organs, your lipids, right? Cholesterol, we get that tested. And in part of those 3 combination tests, we do fasting blood glucose. And that's just checking where's our sugar at when we haven't eaten in more than 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours. What does that look like? And it should be less than 100. If you have not eaten in 4 to 6 hours and your blood sugar comes back as if you had just eaten a snack, i.e. maybe it's 200 or 220, right? Our blood sugar spikes when we eat, and then the blood sugar goes into the cell. That's how it should work. Spike when we eat, into the cell, spike when we eat, into the cell. But if it's spiked and we haven't eaten, there's a problem. That shows me as your doctor that if you haven't eaten for 6 hours, does the sugar in your blood look like you just had a snack? What's going on? Insulin's not showing up to do its job, right? So if your fasting glucose is above a certain amount, less than 100, you're good. 100 to 125, pre-diabetes window. 125 and larger, you're diabetic or could be diabetic. So that's our first line of defense. but it's not super accountable because it's a one shot, right? It's only your blood glucose in that moment. Where have you been the last 2 to 3 months? What's your average blood glucose over time? Well, that's where the second test comes in, and it's called your A1C. It's a specialized test. It's not usually it's not part of the annual workup of a screening or a physical, so make sure you ask for it if you want to know. And your alpha 1C tests your blood sugar over the life of a red blood cell, which is about 3 months. So it gives us a good indicator for maybe you were just really high at 130 fasting blood glucose because you're super stressed out, you didn't sleep, you're running late, you almost got hit by a car. All those things, the adrenaline of stress increases blood sugar because now we need fuel for the brain to work. So maybe your fasting blood glucose was a false negative or a false positive, right? It looked high, but there were other circumstances. That's why we need to always dig deeper and do the A1C, because the A1C is the gold standard. It's going to tell me over the last 3 months if you've been high. And when we get the A1C number, for those of you who have gotten tested before, below 5.7, you're in the clear. 5.7 to 6.4, that's where we're flirting with some prediabetes. And once you're above 6.4, then you have diabetes. Your blood sugar has been too high for too long, and now a disease process has begun. So between, fasting glucose and A1C, those are two indicative ways or tests that you can do cheap, easy, fast to know if you have diabetes, if you have prediabetes, where you're at. And I highly recommend, if you're going to get this done regularly, everybody, plot it on some sort of graph and or write down your values. Because if you're 5.7 1 year and you're 6.4 2 years later, they're both normal, but it increased. So is next year going to be in the danger zone? I don't know. So when we know our own trends of our own lab values, we can act quickly, we can prevent a bunch of stuff, and we can catch things before they turn into disease states. So those are the different types of diabetes, the 2 tests to focus on. There are other tests, glucose challenge, if you've ever had to, while you're pregnant, maybe, they make you,
I've done it.
Drink, this disgustingly
Drink that
sweet
little gross
drink. Yeah.
Yep.
And then they test you 1 hour, 2 hours, and sometimes 3 hours afterward to see that your blood sugar is going down, right? You jack it up by drinking the drink. And then over time, your body should use your insulin to pull that sugar into the cell. Mm-hmm. But if your body isn't and the glucose stays high, then you've been diagnosed with gestational diabetes. And so that's the glucose tolerance test, which is another test. So those are 3 tests, 3 types of diabetes, being aware of prediabetes, and please screen. So please screen. Get your tests done every year and track. Yeah, that's my biggest advice with that.
Is there anything you can do? Is there like an at-home test, or do you always have to have a medical professional administer those glucose tests? Not the gestational diabetes one, but the ones where you're just monitoring your blood sugar.
That's a good question. So you don't need to go into a doctor's office or an urgent care or anything like that. Glucometers are sold all in every CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, anywhere that there's a pharmacy. Glucometers, just because it is such a common disease, 1 in 10 Americans have diabetes. So the testing kits, the testing strips, all this stuff is available over the counter in a lot of cases. It could get a little pricey, a few $100s. That's why having insurance can help if you do have diabetes. But if you don't have diabetes, but you have a family history of it, or you've been told you have prediabetes, or you want to manage it, a glucometer, $80 to $100 to have at home. You do have to prick your finger. You have to put a drop of blood on a little, basically a little card, and it's in this little glucometer. It takes about 30 seconds, and then it will tell you your blood sugar. So there's not an at-home way, if I put my finger in a glass of water, it turns green. There's no shortcut like that or cool home remedy for testing blood sugar. But there are easy over-the-counter ways, like a glucometer is what it's called, or a glucometer, depending on who you ask. But it's testing glucose, right? It's a meter to test your glucose. It's built right in the name. So if you are concerned, that's what I would suggest is and I had a glucometer in my office, and every once in a while, if I'm I'm kind of getting a little lightheaded, can't remember the last time I ate, let me check my blood sugar, too low, I need to eat, too high, it's okay. I need to calm down. I'm stress eating maybe too much that day or something. So it is really helpful information, just to help. So again, I wouldn't go that far though, unless there was a family history, or unless I was talking to my doctor and they said, hey, you're flirting with the line of prediabetes, diabetes. Then I would go that far. If I were in your shoes or the general population shoes, then I would get the glucometer and monitor myself and see, what am I fasting? What am I after I eat? Am I within normal ranges? And if not, go see your doctor.
Yeah. I think, and I should have done more research before our show, but I think there's like tech companies that are coming out with stuff that doesn't even require a blood drop, which is going to be so cool. I think to have one in every home in America or global is going to change these statistics, because so many people ignore it until it's too late, or they're too set. So, I mean, I hate blood drops. I hate all that. So it's like, I wouldn't run out and buy that yet unless I was teetering. But to know that there's something you could do at home to me is very empowering, because a lot of people just can't get in at their doctors. It's like a 3-month wait, or they just, it's like the last thing on their to-do list and they put it off.
Exactly. No, exactly. And, people who struggle with severe diabetes or severe changes in blood sugar, if you're highly sensitive or if you have a genetic predisposition, because there are very strong genetic, like very specific genes that if you have it, if your blood sugar falls outside of a 20-point window, you're going to have severe symptoms. So they do actually have permanent ports that are, placed on people that have a constant measure of what your blood sugar is and whether or not you need insulin. But again, those are for severe cases. So I do know technology has the ability to put something in or on the skin and be able to tell you at any moment of any given day. But right now they're just using that tech for severe and extreme cases. But I do think you're right. I think something similar is going to be developed, like your children, my niece, the next generation will probably benefit from wearables more often, and different things that don't require breaking the skin, for sure. So I do know that it's like in process. So I'm curious to see when we get to see it. But man, that would help significantly, right? Especially people with blood aversion. Yeah.
Totally. Totally. All right. Well, everyone that's watching, if you have a question for Dr. Jacquie about diabetes or our topic today, just throw it in the chat. And then we have a game of true or false to play. So basically, I'll just ask the questions and it's kind of a rapid fire. So if you want to chime in the comments, go for it. Okay, so the first question. Diabetes is the leading cause of death in the world. True or false? True or false? I'm going to say, leading cause.
Leading cause of death.
I'm going to go true. True? Question mark? False?
Question mark? False. So when I think of leading cause, go ahead.
Oh, I said I don't know. I was thinking malnutrition, like with kids and stuff, but I don't know.
So the World Health Organization, believe it or not, has listed the top 10 the last couple years, and diabetes hovers around 6th, 7th, or 8th place. That's kind of where it bounces over the last 5+ years. It used to be slightly higher, but now that we have new tools, more effective insulin, more effective drugs, people with diabetes are being managed a lot better. And so it's not in the top 3 or 5 anymore. It's toward the bottom of the list. So when you say leading cause of death, if I'm thinking of the leading cause, I'm thinking of the number 1, which is heart disease, which we kind of all know, which diabetes can actually cause. They're related, they're comorbidities. But for the world, right, the top 10 leading causes of death, to me, that's a leading cause of death. And that does make the list. Diabetes, like I said, does make that top 10 list. Is it number 1? No, but it is in the top 10. So it's very important. It's a pandemic, like epidemic, whatever you want to call it, for sure. 1 in 10 Americans have it. And so about 20% of the population passes, or when we look at everything that causes people to die every year, 20% is heart disease compared to 3 to 5% is diabetes. Just to give numbers to any data heads out there. So it's like, is it true or false? It's true if we're saying top 10. It's false if we're saying number 1. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally. Okay. So number 2. Type 1 diabetes is most common in elderly people. True or false? So I feel like you answered that one.
I just said this.
Type 1 was more for juvenile. So false?
Smart lady. You got it.
Smart lady.
Yeah. So the disease happens in children, teens, and usually young adults. It's very rare that over the age of 20 to 25, we get a diagnosis of type 1 diabetes, but it is possible. You know, it's not impossible, can still happen. It's just rare.
Okay, number 3, type 2 is preventable. True or false? I am going to say absolutely true.
Not a lot of people know that. Not a lot of people know that, and you're absolutely right. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you can definitely prevent and or significantly delay type 2 diabetes. You know, it's been proven. They're very achievable and fact driven. You know, things that you can do for your lifestyle and your diet to help prevent it. And or if you do have it, you can put it in remission, meaning you are no longer insulin dependent. So
yeah, I know someone who did that. She was probably in like her 50s, and she ate a lot of candy. She wasn't even really overweight. She just had some bad eating habits, and she completely reversed her type 2 diabetes and doesn't have it anymore. So it was pretty incredible. So if you want it, if you want it bad enough to change your lifestyle, it's possible.
It's very possible. It is heavy lifting, but think about it. It took you a very long time in her 50s to develop diabetes. That's a long time. That's decades and decades of doing something one way. So like it will be heavy lifting to shift, you know, that downward spiral back to an upward one, but it's very worth it. Like you said, you know, now you don't have to worry about all of the issues that comes along with diabetes, you know, so, and you elongate your life by at least 5+ years.
Nice. No, that's huge. Okay, number 4. People with diabetes can still live well in spite of their condition. Someone say yes. True.
Of course, especially now. I mean, before we really knew how to manage it or we made synthetic insulin, it was unfortunately more or less a death sentence. But now, right, the last 30, there actually was a 30-year study published by the University of Pittsburgh back in, I want to say 2012, 2013. Anyway, type 1 diabetes, people born after 1965 had a life expectancy of about 70 years. And previous to that, it was in their 50s. They would lose 20 to 30 years on their life having type 1 diabetes and being insulin dependent. Because we didn't have ways to track. We didn't have glucometers as readily available. They were big and clunky and expensive. Insulin, right? The right dosage and trial and error. You know, these were all issues. So now you can have a great quality of life and still have diabetes. You know, right now the average expectancy is 77 for males and 81 for females, compared to, I think it's like 81 and 86. So it's a handful of years that type 1 and type 2 diabetics, you know, they may lose on their life, but that's only in people who were less controlled, meaning they didn't check their glucose levels. They didn't take their medications regularly. They didn't try to lose weight or change their diet, right? So you can get back those years if you make the appropriate changes. So yes, you can live well, but it will mean change in behavior. Right? Dietary, lifestyle, weight management, supplements, herbs, doctor visits, management, glucometers, tracking, awareness, reflection. It requires all of that. But once you get in the groove, which a lot of my patients have, it's just like second nature. And they're fantastic, you know, 75-year-olds hiking mountains and stuff. So yes, it's very, very possible if you respect and honor yourself in the process.
Totally. And that leads to the next one, which is diabetes meal prep and meal planning complicated? True or false? And I would say with exactly what you're saying, it doesn't have to be once you kind of know what to do.
Exactly. That was going to be my answer. So if somebody their whole lifestyle has been drive-through, right? And now we're having the discussion of we're going to have to develop a life skill like cooking. And or develop a new budgetary process, maybe like some sort of healthy food drop, right? Where they bring the food packaged to you and it's a meal and you cook it and, you know, all those boxed food things. Some people that don't want to develop the skill of cooking, they just do that. So either you're going to spend more time and energy learning to cook, or you're going to spend more money with pre-made meal kits. So that in and of itself is a difficult barrier for people to overcome if they're used to every meal they've ever gotten for 30, 40, 50 years, they've been sitting in their car, right? That's a whole huge lifestyle shift. So yeah, when we say diabetes meal planning is complicated, to them, it will be complicated. To them, they have to crawl before they can walk, right? And they're still in their crib. So when we talk about people who are familiar with cooking or maybe just drink too much, or when they do cook, it's too much sugar or too much dairy added or things that can make blood sugar wonky, and we just have to tweak some stuff, but the skill set is there. They're already crawling and or walking, so now we can help them run. My weird analogies, but that's not going to be as complicated. That's going to be easy. That's going to be more straightforward, right? So to answer the question, it really depends on you as a person, as a patient, how willing you are, your skill set, what you do, what you don't do. But by and large, it's really not that complicated. There are a handful of rules to pay attention to: non-starchy vegetables, lean sources of protein, healthy fats to keep you full. And if you're going to eat starches, do complex whole grains like quinoa or barley or, whole wheat, things like that. And just check your stuff regularly. And if you can combine that and know those food groups, any combination of that, you'll do great. So it's not complicated. It's the eye of the beholder, I guess, is how I'm going to answer that. The answer to that question depends on you. So, it really does just depend. And I've had, oh man, Deanne, I've taken a year to work with someone on developing the skill set to manage their diabetes. And I've also had 2 visits and somebody hits the ground running and we see massive changes immediately. So, and I've seen it all in between. It just depends on the person. Yeah.
The fact that they're going to you is a huge step, I think.
Yes.
Because I have parents who have diabetes and I've told them for years to, you can reverse it and you can do things through diet, and they won't even take the step to see a naturopath or talk to the doctor about ways to not use insulin. It's like, I feel like, without offending people, like insulin's kind of the easier way out. Like, take the shot, eat whatever, don't manage it.
Yeah.
So the fact that you have people that have come to you is like, I applaud anyone that takes that step. To me, that's like, whether it takes them 2 years or it takes them 2 weeks, it's like such a huge accomplishment that they just realized, hey, I can like
totally
take
agree.
matters in a and I can like change what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So
they feel empowered.
That's so
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And see, your parents are a perfect example of, I don't live in their head, so I'm not sure, but is it fear of being judged? Is it fear of having to change? Is it the discomfort of the new process and the unknown? There's so many different motivating factors, especially as people get older, right? The whole saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's like, if they have an idea of the healthcare system, they have an idea of their diabetes and how they're managing it, it's like me coming along and like, well, there's so much more than meets the eye. It kind of throws a pebble into that machine and throws it all off course. And now I'm creating more problems than solutions. So there are a bunch of people like that. I've had people come in or call, get the free consult. Do you want to schedule? Oh, it's too much work, or, oh, this is just too different than what I'm used to. So, it is really common, especially in elder communities, to, what I do. It's, so I agree with you. I think it's a big deal when they do take the step and they do finally ask for help. It's not about usually the end goal, right? It's about making progress, not about perfection. And it's about just walking one foot in front of the other toward the goalpost. And if your parents ever have any questions, tell them to call me.
I was just thinking as you're answering, I was like, I'm gonna try to encourage them. I can't make them do anything. Watch this episode, watch the replay. So Mom and Dad, if you're watching it, hi. And then I would just, without speaking for them, I would think it's like fear of change. I think that's probably what a lot of people, it's just that fear of like that unknown of what you'd have to change and do.
Of course. So. Yeah. Which I respect and understand. I used to be confused by, like, what the heck are you seeing me for if you don't want to change? But that was when I was really ignorant to just how difficult behavior changes for a lot of people, and some people are really fluid with it, and some people are just slow and steady, and change is very, very difficult to them. It's threatening, it's uncomfortable. And so those are the people who take longer. But again, it's just about that progress and knowing that every step of the way they have somebody there helping hold them accountable, supporting them, answering their questions, which is a completely different healthcare industry than what we're used to. Your parents are probably 4 to 6 decades deep in like the 3 to 7 minute visit, the revolving door, you wait an hour, you see the doctor for 5 minutes, you pay your copay, you're out the door. And so that's a lot that I'm contending with as a naturopath in terms of an industry, right? To get someone to want to do something about it. And what are herbs and you want me to take these potions and these pills? And, so I do understand. But usually 1 or 2 conversations of seed planting and just like, hey, look, this is an option. This is what it entails. Only you can really decide, it's like, that's the way to the water hole, but you can't pull them and force them to drink. Right? You could just be like, hey, this is the way. I'll be there hanging out if you want to come, and it can be difficult. So my heart goes out to you with your parents, because I know you can see it and you're probably like, I want you around as long as possible. I don't want you to suffer. Please just go get extra help. And for them, that is really threatening the identity they've built around their disease in the health industry, right? So
yeah, a whole another sidebar, but I think a lot of it, and I won't talk about it too much further, but I heard my mom talk to her diabetic nurse, and I was like, ask a juice cleanse. Like, I really think you should do like a one under a doctor's supervision. And the diabetic nurse was like, I've never heard of a juice cleanse. And I'm like, this is like 19. I was like, how has she never heard of it? And I'm like, and you're advising people with diabetes? Like, that makes me just a little frustrated in our healthcare system, because I think sometimes they'd rather just say, take the insulin than like, look at herbs and look at, real food versus, whatever. So sidebar for another day. We can get all fired up about that.
Yeah. Oh, we can totally. I'm glad today's episode got a little extended because no, and I agree with you. I totally agree with you. And a lot of those people, unfortunately, it's like a matching game. I walk in with a disease, and as a nurse or a doctor, here's the drug that matches, right? I walk in with a disease, here's the drug that matches. And unfortunately, it's a big matching game when we're talking pharmaceuticals, at least. And so peeking our head outside of the matching game is like, well, what else is out there? It can't just be this 1 or 2 drugs, right? Doesn't really happen in the medical community, the conventional medical community. Sometimes it does. But it's not very, very common. Whereas naturopaths, we're taught to treat the root cause of the issue, not the matching game, right? But the like digging game, digging deeper, what's really happening. And that can take time, money, resources, energy, ownership. The patient has to own that they're the ones who put themselves in this position in a lot of cases, and that can be heartbreaking for them. So there's a lot more involved, right? And that poor nurse, she's probably thinking she's just doing her job and helping people. But I think what she doesn't realize is by not taking it that step further and not looking around at other options, she's limiting her ability to help, and she's limiting her ability to support her patient base because she's just so focused on the matching game of healthcare, And I don't blame her. I mean, that's just how the educational systems are set up for nurses and doctors. It's how the healthcare system is set up. And so, I just wanted something different and more, but to each their own. If that's what she feels comfortable with, and that's kind of the state of affairs now, she's just doing her job. So it's like, don't shoot the messenger. But I agree with you. Sometimes it's very, going with my mother to the neurologist, for example, like I understand the way that community reacts, what they know, what they don't know, right, is just baffling sometimes and almost a little scary. So I totally resonate with that. I'm not going to, I think every medicine has its place, but yeah, I think talking about a juice fast or juice cleanse with a diabetic nurse is not,
doesn't know what that is. Yeah, I know.
It's not surprising. Like, what? It's a little disheartening, but it's not surprising at the same time.
It's not surprising.
So, thank you for sharing.
Like, okay.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no problem. Well, everyone who's watching, okay, I have another question, and then we'll do a few more of these true or falses. Okay, all people with diabetes have to carry insulin with them. True or false? I always think of like people with who have diabetes have like an apple like in their purse ready to go. So I'm not quite sure on that one. What's the answer?
Okay. So when it comes to it's a safe than sorry thing. Type 1 diabetics always need insulin, even if they're just going to have a piece of candy. So they definitely should carry insulin with them all the time. type 2 diabetics, if you can manage on medication, or maybe you're not quite insulin, you're not dependent on insulin as of yet, or your insulin dose is very low, then it's like if you leave home without it, it's not going to be like a type 1 diabetic issue where it's like life or death. It's going to be like you feel a little crappy, you need to go home on your lunch break and get your insulin or your medication or whatever, and you'll feel better. So it's a little less scary with type 2 if you're not carrying your insulin. But type 1, I would highly recommend always having a backup insulin for sure, because your body's just not making it. So you need it,
Yeah. Okay, number 7, diabetes is the main cause of blindness. Oof,
what do you
that's
think?
a crazy one. I'm going to go true.
Believe it or not, you're right.
Oh, that's scary.
Yes. So high blood sugar can often lead to problems in the eye, blurry vision, cataracts, glaucoma, retinopathy, right? The blood pressure changes because the blood sugar's changing. And so, our eye is a very delicate system, and we need specific blood flow to it. And if we don't get it, not enough or too much, or the pressure changes, we can definitely have vision issues with diabetes. And diabetes is actually the primary cause of blindness in adults ages 20 to 75. So if you're going blind between 20 and 75, chances are it's related to diabetes.
Wow, interesting. Okay, number 8. Is it possible to be completely cured from diabetes, true or false? And you mentioned the word remission a few times. So I'm going to maybe say completely cured, no, but I don't know.
No, you're absolutely right. There's no cure. There's no like, oh, we tested for diabetes and there's no sign of it anywhere ever, and you will never get it again ever, right? It's like cancer remission. You can be cancer clear, like on tests, but maybe there's a couple of cells left over that in the right environment over time, you could have cancer return. So their cure to me means it is completely obliterated and it will never come back. Like a bacterial infection, there's a cure for it, because chances are you can stop it and you will never, get that exact same one again. Will you be exposed to other infections? Of course, but there's a cure for that one disease. And then you'll go a year or two and maybe you get sick and then you fix it, blah, blah. So when it comes to long-term chronic illnesses or breakdown of different organ systems, like the pancreas issue and diabetes, now we're looking at something that, we can't completely cure, but we can put in remission, meaning we're no longer dependent on or all of our labs have normalized, right? So for instance, somebody walks in, I had type 2 diabetes for 10 years. I was insulin dependent. I was on metformin. I lost 50 pounds. I changed my diet, took a couple years. But then I slowly started getting off the metformin. My insulin dose got so low. One day I was like, hey, what if I just ride it out and don't take insulin? And my blood sugar stayed normalized. I went to my doctor. We started having the conversation. I went off insulin. My A1C, my fasting glucose, normal every 6 months for the last 3 years. That is a remission case, right? There is a chance it could come back if they fall off, if they don't pay attention to their, monitoring, if they, do develop some sort of like alcohol habit or food habit that's negatively impacting, if they gain the 50 pounds back, if, there's always a chance for it to happen again. So you can get it into remission, but there is no cure for diabetes.
Gotcha. Okay. Good example there too. Okay. We're going to do one more question. So there is no way of telling when blood glucose levels drop way too low, except using one of those glucose meters. And I'm going to say that that's false, that there's some signs maybe.
So, there's definitely signs. So glucometer is going to tell you for sure whether you're hypoglycemic or not. So do you remember when we said fasting glucose should be less than 100 and that's normal? Well, if you get below 55, 60, 55, now you're hypoglycemic. Your body is so low on blood sugar that now you are irritable. You can't mood stabilize. You can't physically or emotionally stabilize. So you get dizzy, vertigo type stuff. You can't focus. You feel irritable and moody. You go to grab your bottle and it's like your hand's a little short or a little long. You can't gauge distance anymore. Again, that's the blood flow to the eye issue, right? We get dizzy, we just, inattention, we're unfocused. We ask the same question a couple times, shaking, sweating, seizures, fainting. All of those things are signs of hypoglycemia. And usually that can happen in people who do have hypoglycemia naturally. Their body just overly produces insulin and uses blood sugar really, really quickly. Or we can sometimes see hypoglycemia or these symptoms in people who over-induce or over-inject insulin, right? So maybe they only needed a couple units, but they did like twice as many as they needed. Well, their insulin's going to go to work and it's going to grab all the glucose from the blood it can till eventually there's not enough in the blood to stabilize. So if you over-medicate, or if you already have the disease state of hypoglycemia, definitely be aware constantly, do the glucometer thing. But for those of you who maybe fall in the middle or kind of wondering if any of those symptoms happen, check your blood sugar, eat a snack. If you feel better, 20, 30 minutes later, you were having a hypoglycemic little lull there. So just be aware of it. Yeah, but there's no like home test, for something like that, outside of a glucometer at least.
Totally. Okay, little bonus question. So if you give your kids a ton of candy, okay, so mine are 4 and 2, and they have discovered sweets, they they want their gummies, and they want their lollipops. And if they're at a birthday party, it's the first question is, when's the cake? It's like, so much sugar. So if a kid has too much sugar, is that going to lead to diabetes?
I think it's natural for kids to want sugar. I'm just going to throw that out there. It's the only taste on our tongue that we're born hardwired to desire, because again, the brain and the spinal cord work on glucose. So you can see limbically, right, why we're so hardwired to really like sugar, because our body needs it. And so we want to constantly know what's sweet. The only issue is, food manufacturers and candy manufacturers have capitalized on that limbic link to sweet. And they're like, well, if we're wired for sweet, let's give them what we're wired for. And then they overdo it, right? So sugar consumption alone is actually not shown to cause diabetes like a lot of people think. What ends up happening is when we consume a lot of sugar over a chronic period of time, years, months, years, we become obese. And it's actually obesity, specifically central obesity or fat that's accrued around our organs that kind of slowly suffocate the organs and prevent them from working correctly. That's the type of obesity and just obesity in general, that's more highly linked to diabetes, not just sugar consumption alone. But when we peel back the onion layer, right, why do people get obese? They overeat calories and undermove their body. So people who are sedentary and eat high calorie foods that have low nutrition, right? Like fast food, like prepackaged foods, things like that. Those are the type of people that we tend to see get diabetes. So, having a pizza every day for a year or having a lollipop every day for a year, the pizza will probably develop diabetes before the lollipop will. Simply because of the caloric intake and the weight issue and the weight distribution issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Yeah, no, it's a serious
Anything
topic.
that sugar's just going to make
our
your life
our
harder.
kids have our kids have memberships to a trampoline park. I'm like, thank gosh, you guys are so active, because it offsets all that. We actually
they have to find a way to burn it out. Yeah, they have to find a way to burn it out. Yeah. So if a kid was like, hey, mommy, will I get diabetes if I eat sugar? It's like, no, but you will have a sugar crash and you will not feel good, right? Because they're going from hyperglycemic to hypoglycemic when their body eats that high level of sugar. Way too much sugar, and that's that crazy, like they had 10 cups of coffee. And then that hypoglycemic crash, the poor guys, poor ladies, poor things, they're dipping below a healthy blood sugar, and their brain is thinking it's starving, so they get irritable and inconsolable and nothing feels good. And it's like they just probably need a little protein and fat, like a little bit of a healthier satiating snack, get the blood sugar back up, help them regulate and avoid a second crash, right? So sometimes that's the mistake some parents and caregivers can make, is they'll start the day off with high sugar food like cereal or pancakes or waffles, thinking that they're getting nutrition, donuts, right? And then they notice the mid-morning crash. So what do? Well, now we're going to go get them a Capri Sun or popsicle or some sort of snack, again, laced with sugar. The kid seems okay for an hour or two, and then they crash again. Oh, let's have some Oreos, right? And then it's like, oh, well, let's have like a decent dinner, but then there's dessert, right? And then their bedtime's 9, but they're up till 10:30. And the parents are just, they feel overwhelmed and kind of clueless, when in reality, their biology is just trying to do what it knows how to do, which is utilize the sugar it's given. And then when there's no sugar around, trying to hold it together the best it can until it gets that sugar again, right? And so, you know, it's I think it's just lack of awareness. But if we really gave children complex carbohydrates, healthy fats, and high quality lean protein at the beginning of the day, the whole rest of the day would be set up for success, because now we're giving their brain food, we're giving their body food, we're giving their muscles food, and they're staying fuller longer, so they don't get that severe hypoglycemic dip, right? So sorry for tangenting with the kid thing, but I do think that it, you know, it starts early. Relationship with food starts very early, you know, like very, very early. And so I don't think it's ever too soon to talk through, well, mommy, why can't I have the sugar? Well, instead of like, well, you're going to have a sugar crash, or because you're going to be a pain in my butt. It's like taking that moment to get on their level and say, this is what's happening in your body. And when you crash and you get cranky or sad, I don't like to see you uncomfortable. So instead, let's have a sandwich for lunch and some berries afterward. And then we'll save the popsicle for another day, or we'll save the Oreos for another day, right? So it's about teaching them moderation early on, and it's about teaching that, because I think sometimes, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but when we hoard sugar or keep it away from them, now they're like curious and it's mysterious and they want more of it, right? So it's not about demonizing sugar. It's about allowing them moderation and asking them awareness. How do you feel now that you had the popsicle or the lollipop? Checking in an hour later, how do you feel now? How do you feel now? And really allowing them to connect to, this is what it feels like to have sugar high, sugar low. I don't like this feeling. The sandwich felt better. I played all afternoon. Mommy didn't, you know, we didn't fight. Like, you know, these things are real for them in their little world. And so making those connections will be so helpful when they're teens and young women and body issues and eating disorder, you know, all that stuff around food, which, you know, as women we go through. So, and I'm sure as men, sorry, didn't mean to like, you know, eliminate a whole gender, but you get my point, is the relationship to food is so important early on. So don't demonize sugar, in my opinion, but don't have it like all around the house. So every meal or every few hours they have access to something that's just going to jack them up.
Yeah, totally. My 2.5-year-old, we bought Girl Scout cookies and we hid like Thin Mints in our freezer, and she found them and she took 2 little Thin Mints to the playroom, and I found she actually took the whole sleeve, and I got in there and I was like, oh my gosh, how many of you had? And she had like 2 or 3. I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to demonize it.
Little body. That's like us having 2 or 3 sleeves. You know?
Oh, I know.
3 cookies for her is just like, whoa. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, it starts young, like you're saying. It is like innate, that like sweet hit, and like so crafty to go hide in the playroom.
It is. Yes. Oh, it's one of the main drivers of toddler manipulation is their mission for sugar. For sure. For sure.
Oh yeah. Like, and of course as parents, we probably mess them up so many times by like bribery with like, if you do this, we'll give you this, you know, and so yeah.
And then they learn that, right? Which, look, we're all raised that way, or to some extent.
We're all raised that way.
But I can remember my niece when she was 4. She's like, I'm not going to stop crying till I get the lollipop. And like that was her. She knew it was bargaining. But I was watching her at the time, not mom and dad. And I was like, well, then cry, because, you know, you're not getting the lollipop. And she was so frustrated, but she felt her feelings. We had berries instead, and we moved on with our day. You know, it's like they only use it as a ploy when they know it can work. So if we don't allow it to work, it won't work. But it always works. And I'm not a parent. I'm not on 24 hours a day, right? I'm like cool aunt visitor. So I get to check out. You don't get to check out. So I don't blame you for having like, please, just if you're just good and quiet and you'll get some candy or something, you know, it makes a lot of sense. Yes. It makes a lot of sense. It's so not about beating ourselves up. Yeah.
I know. Eva said she's guilty of bribing her kids with sugar too. It's like, I think every parent at some point is like I used to do stroller strides a lot, and you like pack all the snacks, keep kids in the strollers while you do your workout. And it's like I always had my like high caliber, like hidden treat. If it's like, if it worse
last
came to worse, I needed to bribe. I was like, this is in there. So
Hey,
yeah,
we're only
that's 'cause-
human. We do what works. I get it. I
yeah.
totally
Sometimes
get
you got to get through your day. Sometimes you just got to get through the day.
exactly.
Totally. All right. Well, hopefully everyone's enjoying the show, and we've seen a couple followers. So thank you guys, all of our new followers. If you haven't followed yet, just hit the little follow button. We would love that. And you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and we're under @MiddleWorldHerbs. So definitely check that out. And Abby says, so funny, I bribe myself. Yeah, we also bribe ourselves. Totally agreed. Yes, I do the same. All right, well, let's talk about our incredible herbs that we have today. So we have the Middleward Berberine HCl 40 and the Berberine with bitter melon and the naba leaf. So Dr. Jacquie, I'd love to learn a little more about the properties of berberine, especially for people who are interested in managing their sugar levels. So tell us a little bit about that.
So berberines are kind of magical in my opinion. So this is that yellow colored chemical known as an alkaloid, which we've talked about. And all plants have different magic ingredients, if you will, that act differently in different bodies, on different systems. We've talked at length about milk thistle, for example. It has a magical ingredient specifically protective to the liver, right? And so berberine is, the magical ingredient is alkaloid. And those are compounds that are naturally found in plants. And then we pull that out. And when we take it, what we notice are the effects that it had in the plant, it actually has on us. So when the plant wants to protect itself from trauma, infection, wants to stabilize its nutritional usage from the soil, guess what? We get all those benefits in our body. And so that alkaloid in berberine helps us manage that. And so what it's going to do is it helps with metabolism, berberine. Berberine also has been shown to lower glucose levels in people with diabetes, almost as if it acts as insulin. It resensitizes our body to our own insulin. So maybe if you're type 2 and your body's making insulin, but your cells aren't responsive to it, it can resensitize and reconnect the cell in the insulin, making it function again. And so the alkaloid berberine is very effective in that. It stops proliferation of bad cells or growth of bad cells. Again, it's antibacterial, so it helps prevent infection, antiviral, all of these things. It's going to help with cancer cells, tumor cells, all the good stuff. It's been proven to lower cholesterol in a lot of double-blind placebo studies, which is fantastic. But when we're talking about diabetes specifically, it basically helps your body respond to its own insulin a lot better, and then prevents the liver from creating more glucose, right? Because remember, we've talked about the liver, if we're not eating a lot of glucose, our liver has stored some for a rainy day, right? So if we're not eating any sugar or whatever, our liver has a little bit that it can, bring to the blood and say, hey, just so you don't die, I had some in storage, here you go, right? So, and that's by design, and that's on purpose. Like, we want that to be happening. But what we notice with berberine is it's preventing the liver from creating even more glucose, so that your cells have to use what's in your blood. They're not going to go to the storage unit in the liver. So it has to utilize what's in the blood, lowering blood sugar, acting like insulin, which is pretty amazing, right? It helps strengthen the contractility of the heartbeat, which means we're getting more blood flow, more oxygenated blood. Anytime the pancreas, liver, any organ can get more oxygenated, nutrified blood, it's going to work better, right? It just is. And so berberine helps with that as well, and can protect against certain heart conditions and obesity, heart disease. Those are the two most common, and kidney disease. Those are the three things really heavily associated with diabetes. So if we're taking something like a berberine or other plants with those protective alkaloids, our liver's working better, our heart's working better, which means our kidneys are working better, and our pancreas is working better. And so all of those systems that are kind of struggling with diabetes end up getting what they need to function more productively and efficiently from the alkaloids in berberine containing plants. So it's kind of magical, in my opinion, when we look up herbs. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff, and it's being studied extensively, which I absolutely love. My science brain, I nerd out on all the studies all the time.
Awesome. So is it kind of one of those like new discoveries, or have people been using this for like, hundreds of thousands of years? Or just maybe, how long has it been
hundreds
used?
of thousands of years. I'm wondering,
The
like, when did we
dinosaurs. The
evolve
dinosaurs were
from
using
hominid? Yeah, yeah. So it's actually been shown in Ayurvedic, which Ayurveda is the medicine of Asian countries, specifically India, right? And then Chinese medicine, like acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine theory, which is China and other Asian countries. And so it actually was documented as being utilized in care plans or as part of the Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine toolbox, if you will, about 3,000 years ago. So it's definitely been around. People have known about it from trial and error for thousands and thousands of years before modern medicine. So we call it esoteric medicine, or like medicine by trial and error, right? Versus now we have like science-backed medicine where we can actually watch drugs fight certain bacteria under a microscope. We can actually see what's happening live, right? Which we couldn't before. It was like, take this, maybe or it'll work, maybe not, thousands of years ago. And time after time again, every time it was reported on, berberine and berberine containing plants like Oregon grape and golden seal were shown to consistently work thousands of years ago before science. Like, that's, to me, pretty powerful. So no, it's definitely one of the ride or die herbs of esoteric healing. It really is. It really is. Berberine is amazing in that case. So
awesome.
3,000 years, Dan.
3,000.
That's crazy to me. Yeah, that's crazy to me.
I mean, and it's interesting because I don't think I heard about it till this past year. So I feel very lucky that I now know about it, because I really didn't know the word berberine was not in my vocabulary until I started working with Middle World Herbs. So I'm very happy about that. And then if you guys can see, the capsules are this bright, intense yellow color, which is, I think, such a cool color. And the supplement has 97% purity confirmed by third-party testing, which is really not often found in other berberine supplements. So pretty incredible ones right here. Berberine with bitter melon and banaba leaf has like a slightly less yellow intensity, although I always think mine look pretty similar. And both are veggie capsules. You're going to get 60 per bottle. The Berberine HCl4 tea is $18.99, and the one with bitter melon is $20.99. But during this live, you also get to take an additional 20% off. So get that during this live, because you might as well get that extra money saved and it's in your wallet, or maybe get both of them. So that would be a great idea too. So we often get asked, like, what between the two, which one should I choose? So Dr. Jacquie, what are your thoughts on that? Is there a way to choose one? Do they get both? What should they do?
So I think for me, berberine is just because it has so many effects on things like cholesterol, the heart, the liver, the pancreas, diabetes, blood sugar. The berberine alone is great for generalized health, or if you have issues regarding any of those body systems, right? So when we're taking berberine plus bitter melon, those are what are called in the herb world, it's called synergistic herbs. They help each other work better, right? So the bitter melon backs up the berberine, and the berberine backs up the bitter melon. And when we have two constituents or magic ingredients, both acting on the same pathway, we get a more powerful result sooner. And so bitter melon is similar to berberine in the way that it works like insulin in the body. So if your primary concern is diabetes, your primary concern is wanting to get your body to utilize its own insulin more efficiently, and for you to maybe put into remission and or prevent, right? If you have prediabetes, you want to prevent full-blown. If you have full-blown, you want to put it in remission. The berberine with the bitter melon is going to be more effective, because now we have two instruments instead of one, right? So berberine is great for the general health. Again, real quick, if you have heart issues, liver issues, weight issues, if you know for sure you already have diabetes, though, I would definitely spring for the berberine with the bitter melon combination. It's just more effective, you know?
Okay, awesome. And then anyone else who has a question, don't forget to put in the chat. What about precautions? Is there anything to look out for if you take berberine, like if you take it for a long time or anything like that?
So berberine, along with any other medications, because think about it, if you're on metformin, which is a medication that's supposed to do what a berberine already does, right? And now we have two things we're taking that lower blood sugar, or try to manage blood sugar, you could accidentally put yourself in the hypoglycemic state, right? Faint, seizure, all that, which doesn't feel good. So if you're taking any sort of medications that have to do with lowering insulin, insulin resensitization, if you're also taking any sort of heart meds or blood related meds like clotting medications, anything like that, because again, that's what berberine acts on. So it's not really like, it just to me is simple cause and effect. Berberine, heart, liver, diabetes. Am I on heart meds, liver meds, diabetes meds? It'll probably potentiate that or make the drugs work better, faster, causing, an overcorrection of sorts, if that makes sense, right? So just be really careful if you're going to take berberine, especially if you're going to take it over a long period of time. If you are on medications, talk to your herbalist, talk to your doctor, talk to somebody who is, it's within their scope of practice to be able to help give you that information so that we can protect you. That's
Awesome.
really
Abby,
my only
yeah, no, that's so good. Abby wants to know, would it be beneficial to take berberine HCl if you don't have diabetes?
Yes. Yes, it would. And the reason is because to me, berberine is really protective in the way that the alkaloid works. So we just have issues with things like blood sugar, liver function, heart function, the older we get. That's just the reality of aging, right? So if we're taking something that's preventative and protective, like a berberine, I wouldn't take the same dose. If I didn't have any conditions, like I don't have any health conditions right now that I'm being managed for, I'm on no meds, I have no issues. But berberine in food and in supplements, I will always want to have that. Maybe not every single day, all day, right? But it's going to come in and out of my daily regimen because I know how beneficial it is. And I know that taking it now will elongate my window of being symptom-free, disease-free, right? So it is a great general health. There are a handful of herbs that support systems that are constantly being used. Anytime you can support the liver or heart or brain, those three things are just always on, always working. And if we can give that a little push or a little edge, you're always going to notice yourself feeling better, functioning better, sleeping better, eating better, all that good stuff. So yeah, I think even if you don't have diabetes, high cholesterol, fatty liver, any of those other issues, berberine is a great thing to have in your toolkit for sure.
Nice. Yeah, whenever we do our lives with berberine, and I don't have any of those things, fortunately, but I always take a supplement of the one with the bitter melon. That's always the one I grab for. So
I love it. That's great.
I just do it. I'm like, give it to me. Give me all the good stuff. I'll take it. All right. So, give me the goods. All right. So you talked about a lot of the research that you like to geek out on. So what is like the recent research that you're finding about berberine, and especially when it comes to diabetic patients?
So what I was coming across recently, the last couple days, with diabetes is just how special berberine is basically becoming the head of the pack. Berberine and gymnema. Those are two herbs that are very highly related to diabetes and helping prevent and or resensitize insulin. And what I actually just found out today when I was looking up some studies was that they're actually going to study berberine now in its active alkaloid constituents to create a drug for diabetes. That's how strong it is. So it's actually being very highly studied as a potential, drug, essentially. So that to me, when the conventional medical community starts looking at herbs as actual pharmaceutical potentials, then they're taking the plant medicine seriously. They are looking at the data seriously. I've known it's worked for over 2 decades, but like for them, they're just coming awake to how powerful it is. So I think that that's kind of cool that something from a berberine plant, the alkaloid constituents, could be developed into something that could help people. I personally am a little bit more, I lean toward the whole plant I think that the whole plant has other things in it, again, that work synergistically that make the whole plant more effective than pulling just the magic ingredient out and putting it in a pill. But I do have to give props to the conventional medical community that they're starting to take notice, and they're respecting herbs. They're respecting, Ayurveda and Chinese medicine that have been using stuff like this for 3,000 years. And I think that that's really cool, in terms of the newest research happening. But time and time again, you look up berberine, do a quick PubMed search, for instance, thousands and thousands of things will come back. And almost every study, what do we see? We see that it's kills bacteria and viruses, done. Limits inflammation, done. Kills oxidative stress, helps with that free radical damage that we've talked about before, done. Stops cancer cell growth, done. Helps resensitize insulin to, in the pancreas, making more insulin, or our body resensitizing to insulin. So our blood sugar is more stabilized, so our weight's more stabilized, so our heart works better, so our liver works better. Done, 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 check, check, check. So science is not only backing these things up consistently, but it's been so consistent and so powerful for so long that now they're looking into different drug combinations and drug trials for it. So I think that that's pretty impressive and pretty cool. At least my nerd brain does.
Yeah. Super impressive. I love that. Well, I'm going to just switch gears real quick to the charms that we have on each of our bottles.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys noticed them, but they have this little positive message or affirmation. This one says, any exercise is better than no exercise. And these were actually the brainchild of our founder, Eva. And she'd gone on a trip to Bergamo, Turkey, and she went to the site of the Asclepian Temple. And this was one of the most ancient hospitals. And now it's kind of the ruins, but you can go and tour it a little bit. And inside the ruins is this dark tunnel where there's like little cracks of light. And that's where the ancient healers would whisper mantras and positive messages and affirmations to the patients who slowly walked through the tunnel. So they were way ahead of their time with the connection of mind and body in healing. And so that's how she came up with the idea for what's called a whisper. So every time you buy a bottle, you get a different whisper on them, and you can collect them, and it just kind of helps like center you and ground you as you take your supplements. So this one says, every day may not be good, but there's something good in every day. So I think it's just so cool, and they're handcrafted. They're pretty incredible. So that's just another like little bonus thing that you get when you order Middle World Herbs. And I think that the connection of mind and body is so important, especially today with all the things we have going on in the world. So Dr. Jacquie, question for you. Is there a connection between our emotions or stress and diabetes?
Ooh, I think anyone who's present, who's watched in a previous episode of us, knows the answer is definitely yes, right? I mean, mind, body, two sides of the same coin, right? We're not one, we're not the other, we're inherently linked. It's inherently both. So what is that connection though? What the heck? How can my thoughts or, my stress add to my pancreas not making insulin? That doesn't make sense. So, it can be hard to connect, but actually what research is showing is that high levels of the stress hormone cortisol stop insulin producing cells in the pancreas from working. Okay. And so when we're not making enough insulin, we're not uptaking the blood sugar stays high. That happens long enough, we get diabetes, right? So what's that mechanism? What's happening? Well, we have to remember that we're limbic. We're animals at our core, wrapped in a human shell. And what do I mean by that? Is our limbic brain, our animal brain, sleep, safety, sex, food, water, right? These are what we're wired for. It's just who we are. Now our brain grew a frontal cortex over this little limbic system. And now our frontal cortex is like money, timetables, goals, executive functioning, thinking, processing, right? And so we're animals at heart covered by this consciousness of sorts. And that's how our brain is structured. So that brings me to our nervous system. And when our nervous system, or this animal part of our brain inside, thinks we're being threatened, it can't tell that it's just a bill in the mail that we can't pay, or it's a deadline at work that we can't make, or we feel a failure in our relationship. The same signals are produced whether a tiger's chasing us to kill us, or we almost got hit in traffic, we're late to an appointment. Our frontal cortex has very little, right? it's just at that point, we're limbic, we're all animals. So we become fight or flight. It's that nervous system part. We have sympathetic and parasympathetic, and that sympathetic is fight or flight. So our cortisol jacks up, the stress hormone, our pupils dilate, and our blood flows away from our organs into our hands and feet, ready to stand and fight or ready to run. And we don't need to worry about using sugar from the blood. We don't worry about digestion. We don't worry about the digestive process. We're like, screw the meal we just ate, save your butt, get out of danger. But again, our body can't tell the difference between a tiger and someone breaking up with us, or, you know what I mean? Just as an example of like the things that stress our body out. And so it's not really life or death, but our body's taking it in as life or death, jacking up the cortisol, lowering insulin. And over time, what ends up happening is blood sugar stays so high for so long. So if you're chronically stressed, you have a high stress job, a demanding job, you don't create balance in your life for sleep, rest, movement. It will catch up to you because those systems can only stay functioning for so long before we start weakening them. And once we weaken them, if we continue even more, they degrade. And once they're degraded, we can't get them back. So yes, stress, emotions, all that stuff is very highly linked to how our body and biochemistry work, very highly linked to diabetes in particular.
Okay, interesting. Yes, I love that. All right, well, if you're just jumping on, our time is almost up, so I'll give you a real quick recap of the supplements that we showed. We have the Berberine HCl 40, and then we have our Berberine HCl with bitter melon and banana leaf. So the 40 is really good for blood sugar support and providing a metabolic boost and cholesterol level support. And then the one with the bitter melon is a really good supplement for all of the things mentioned above, plus if you're dealing with toxic overload, or maybe you've just had too many fried or sweet foods. So it can be good with that too. And another amazing thing I want to share with you guys about each supplement is that we've partnered with One Tree Planted to join them on the global reforestation mission. So by buying Middle World supplements, you're not only helping your own body, but you're also helping the earth we live in. So every supplement purchased is One Tree Planted, which is so awesome. So Dr. Jacquie, as we get ready to wrap up, if you could just leave everyone with the top 3 most important things about diabetes, what would those be?
This is a great question. So I was kind of racking my brain. I'm like, there's so many things to remember.
So many things.
But so many. I think the number one thing is if you are obese, and this is not a judgment, this is not me saying, you're less of a person. I know sometimes it can feel that way. I've had some weight issues, so I totally understand how sensitive it is. So I hope this doesn't come across crass. But if you are obese or morbidly obese, try to work on losing some weight if you can. Even like a small calorie deficit every day over time, even if you lost 10 pounds in a year, 1 pound a month, let's say, that's going to get you closer to avoiding diabetes and or remission if you do have diabetes. So please, 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 if you are obese, work on that piece. A healthy weight is the number one risk factor for something like diabetes. Okay. Number 2, if you are obese, if you do have risk factors, or if you do have lifestyle factors to diabetes, if you're feeling a little off, your mood, your concentration, your motor skill ability, right? If any of that stuff is happening, please go see your doctor. Please get your glucose checked. Please check your A1C. Just get the labs. Don't be afraid. We'd rather catch it sooner than later, right? And I think the third thing is, a lot of people, at least my diabetes patients, judge themselves and have a lot of shame wrapped around their diabetes, especially the type 2, because they kind of recognize that they did it to themselves and they just didn't know. And they, so please be gentle and compassionate to yourself, because if being our own bully worked, it would have worked by now. So it doesn't work. So try to be our own friend and try to be kind, because you can't change the past. So let's do our best in the moment and moving forward. And that's all we can do. So take some of that pressure off. Those are my 3 things.
Those are 3 really good ones to end with. I love that. Well, hopefully you guys have all really enjoyed today's Natural Wellness Show. And if you have, will you hit the follow button right now? We would really appreciate that. Yeah, Freddie has a good point. Forgive yourself. Yes, that's so important too. Just to forgive yourself and give yourself that grace, like you're saying. That's so good. And also, let's see, you can also follow at Middle World Herbs on social media. We go live twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And next week on Tuesday, I have an exciting announcement. We'll have the pleasure of introducing you to Dr. Karen DeVore. She's a naturopathic medicine doctor, author, educator, and health consultant. So she'll be joining us on Tuesdays. And then we have our amazing Dr. Jacquie, who comes in on Fridays. So have your questions ready to go. We love to interact with you guys. And next week, we're talking about inflammation and mobility. So big thank you to Dr. Jacquie for joining us today, and always for sharing your amazing energy, passion, and your analogies, all the good stuff. It's always fun to hang out. And the time flies. Like, I can't believe it. We extended our time and we still barely made it in our time limit. So it's like, whoa, look at us go. We can talk for hours. We can do this all night. Huge thank you for everyone that's watching. You guys are all amazing. And we look forward to seeing you guys all next week.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, have a great night, everyone.
Bye.
Hear the whispers from within, balance to restore, ailings to relieve. Feel the nature keeping us, nature healing us, flowers, leaves, and roots within. Hear the mind calming you, soothing you, love and kindness inside out. Let the herbs from Middle World heal. Welcome wellness, welcome wellness. It's revealed herbs, Middle World Herbs.